Welcome back to the Montana Grizzly Leadership Project. My name is Charlie Palmer, and we are joined today by the newest addition to the head coach ranks here at the University of Montana, that person being none other than Grizzly football leader Bobby Kennedy. Kennedy joined the Montana coaching staff shortly before fall camp in 2025 as the receivers coach, and 6 months later, on February 5th of 2026, he was named as the 38th head football coach in the history here at the University of Montana after the retirement of Bobby Houck. Coach Kennedy, welcome to the project.
Thanks, Charlie. It's great to be here.
All right, so let's just suffice to say it's been somewhat of a whirlwind for you for the past 7 weeks or so since being named the head man. What sticks out to you in your first weeks here as the head coach?
Yeah, just that it's been a lot of fun. You know, I'm getting pulled in a lot of different directions, but it was funny. I told my wife, she goes, "Hey, how are things going?" And I said, "They're going really well. But everybody wants a part of my time now, or a piece of my time, I should say."
Me included.
Yeah, but I really enjoy that. Like, I enjoy the relationship part of it. You know, when you're a position coach, the relationship part of it is more with your individual players. And you obviously get to know other guys on the team, but you're really responsible for those 12 or 14 guys. Well, now, being the head coach, it's not only the staff, it's not only the support staff, the trainers, the managers, it's the whole team. And so I've really enjoyed that aspect of it, and really trying to get to know each player and person in the department, and you know that kind of works with me, getting to know them right on a personal level. So that's been a lot of fun for me, and it's a challenge remembering everybody's names.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot of people. You know, when you only deal with 12 or 14 guys, and then the other team members, it's you know, a little bit easier. But just meeting the people out in the community, the supporters, the QB club people, it's been a lot of fun, and it has been a whirlwind.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed every second, every minute, every hour of it.
And then you're obviously right in the middle of spring football now, so you're kind of in it, so to speak.
Yeah, we just finished our 7th practice yesterday, and we have number 8 tomorrow. So we're a little over halfway done. But that's also been very interesting in terms of the management of practice. And you know, I used to go from individual drills to, you know, 7-on-7 or 1-on-1, and then team periods and things like that. And you're really, as a position coach, you're actively involved with your guys. Well, now I tend to not sit back and observe. I'm still active, but now it's, you know, when the play starts, when it stops, giving direction to more than just one group.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been a change, but it's also been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. How would you define your leadership style and your core values?
So I think I can answer that really in kind of one word, and I got it from Jim Caldwell when I worked for him with him at Penn State, but then also Wake Forest. I worked for him at Wake Forest as a receivers coach and then running backs coach. And he always said, and at the time I didn't really always understand it, but now as I've gotten older in this profession, I understand it more. But he always defined himself as a servant coach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and over the years, how I've come to interpret that is, you know, we're here for a reason, right? It's not just for games, and it's not just for practice and things like that, but it's how can you be involved in every aspect of these guys' lives, right? You know, there's an academic side, there's an athletic side, there's a social side, there's a citizenship side. And so if you think of yourself as serving these players and giving them direction and helping them grow up, then I would describe it in those terms.
Where you're helping them be leaders themselves ultimately,
Exactly.
which is, part of servant leadership theory and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny, you know, as a head coach, obviously you you deal with a bigger group, but there's different ways to motivate guys, right? And what makes that individual player, whether it be on the football field or academics or socially, right? What makes them tick, and how do you lead them the best way and point them in the right direction?
Mm-hmm.
I found out as a head coach, different things come across my desk that maybe I haven't had to deal with in the past on a bigger scale. But how do you influence guys to do the right thing, and then also make sure they understand eventually it's for their benefit? And so that's, there's many different techniques. You can bring guys in and talk to them. You can discipline them in a way.
Yeah.
You can threaten them.
Yeah.
I don't like doing that very often, but sometimes, there's times that you have to lay the law down. And what I would say, for example, I'll tell a quick story. There was a guy this fall. He was in my position group, and we knew he had talent, and we knew he could be a good player, but there was a lack of effort sometimes, and of trying, and maybe wasn't comfortable in the offense yet, because we do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But he was always having these different issues, and I've learned over the years from a number of head coaches, and I mean, I can tell stories forever. I might be a little bit like Joe Glenn in that regard.
Yeah.
But it was my first week on the job as head coach, and in fact, it was I think the day after my initial press conference, and we have different academic requirements for our guys. That if you're not at a certain GPA, you're going to have this many hours of study hall, and you got to get those hours in, and you have to meet with our academic coordinator, Helen. And it was kind of ironic, because after working with the young man through the fall, and he wasn't necessarily achieving what he could achieve on the field, and he wasn't necessarily achieving what he could do academically either. That first day after the press conference, I get a report that he was a significant amount of time short of his study hall hours. Okay.
Yeah.
And I made sure that we were going to have a meeting, and that we were going to meet in the academic center, and he was going to see Helen before he saw me. And I walked in. I said, I'm not going to go through this anymore. I said, we have bent over backwards to try to help you. And there comes a point where you either want our help, or you just keep throwing it back in our face, right? And it's like I said, I've never had problems being very direct with guys. I think it's like when you talk about a leadership style, players want you to give your honest opinion and your truth to them.
Right.
Okay? So being direct with guys, I've never necessarily had a problem with that. As I've gotten older, you learn and you grow just like any person. But I walked in and they were talking, and I stopped the conversation. I said, okay, you have two options. You can get in the portal today. Okay? You can get in the portal today, and I won't stop you.
Because
okay?
it's open, right?
You're a new coach. Because it was open. I was a new head coach.
Yeah.
And I said, and you can go somewhere else if somewhere else will take you. Okay? Or I said, your second option is this, that you meet with Helen every week, that you're not a minute late or missing your required number of hours for study hall. You attend all classes. You make all your academic appointments. I said, if you miss any of these things, okay, I'm not going to renew your scholarship. And so he kind of looked at me like, holy cow, right? But sometimes there comes a defining moment, like when people, they're either going to accept your help or they're going to fight you, okay? And being a servant coach like we talk about, you can't just keep giving guys passes, right? Sooner or later, there has to be a breaking point.
Yeah.
Well, long story short, the great thing is he hasn't been on one list and I'm really proud of him. Hasn't been on one list since that meeting. He's doing well in school. He's playing better on the field because there is a correlation, right? Like, so many times when something's not right in one of these guys' lives, then another thing's not going well, right? So it might be the social side, and then the academic side falls apart, and then the football side falls apart. I don't think you can compartmentalize those things. I think if you're doing well in school and you're doing well with your family and social life, and everybody's going to have ups and downs, right? I'm not saying that nobody's going to struggle. But once again, in the servant coach philosophy, that if you're helping these guys try to achieve and trying to move forward and showing them that it's going to be to their benefit, I think eventually they have a chance at a better life.
Yeah.
And if he wouldn't have done those things, right, then you've tried everything you could do, right? And then he made that decision. And so I think that's a success story right now, but it's still a story that's being written and it's in progress. People slip, so how do you help them get back on the horse and saddle up again?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those challenges of servant leadership is, unfortunately, every now and then somebody might try and take advantage of you serving them, and then there's got to be some accountability.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it seems like there's kind of a buzz nowadays with coaching kids hard.
Yeah.
Like on social media, there's just this attention focused on that, but not everybody can handle being coached hard.
Exactly. And it's funny, like I said, I tend to tell stories. I remember when I was a young coach at the University of Wyoming working for a really good head coach in Joe Tiller, who later went on to be the head coach at Purdue and go to the Rose Bowl and just had great success. I was coaching a guy named Marcus Harris as a freshman. And Marcus ended up being a two-time All-American, Blitnikoff Award winner. And I remember one day early in his career, we were doing some drill and, something happened and it didn't go right. And it was, boy, I got on him. I jumped down his throat. Hey, you got to do this and you got to be this way. And he said to me, he goes, hey, BK, he goes, trust me, I hear you. He goes, you just need to talk to me. Mm-hmm. Now, right, some guys respond differently. Some guys are motivated by a little more aggressive coaching. But that's also in this profession, which you have to figure out, right? Like I hear these people say, I've heard people say in the past that, we treat everybody alike, okay? And to me, that's kind of sticking a square peg through a round hole, right? Because all these kids are different. Yep. They have different backgrounds. They have different wants, different needs, different families, different experiences, right? And so I don't think you can treat every kid the same way, and there's going to be kids that you maybe click with right off the bat, or some kids that you have to try to continue to develop a relationship, and show them that you do care, show them that, once again, you're doing this for their best interest, right? And then hopefully their production on the field and then socially and in life will be better. But Marcus taught me a great lesson because Marcus wasn't a guy that you needed to yell and scream at. Now, there have been those guys that you've needed to, after talking to them, that, you have to change the tone once in a while. But what I found in my career, too, as an assistant, and heck, I've done this for 37 years now, coming up, I've always responded better to people who kind of explain things and there were teaching moments, right? Even as a coach, rather than guys that were just on my case all the time, about little things, right? But that's how I respond to things. Maybe some other people respond in a more of a pressure situation better. Mm-hmm. So you just have to find that right button.
Yeah. What would you say your biggest leadership strengths are at this point?
A little bit what we've been talking about, right? Like how do you manage people, right? Because like I said, you can't treat everybody the same, right? And you've got to find that button and or the switch. And for me, it's been, right, how do you get guys to do what you want them on the field, off the field, whatever it is, to see that it's their benefit and to see that they're getting something out of it. Okay. I've always said this, like you look at our offensive coordinator, who I said before I have the utmost respect for, and I'm glad he's here because I think he gives our edge a real offense. Now, Brent Pease is Full Metal Jacket, okay, and I love him for it, right? Because he is extremely demanding, he's extremely tough on the kids. But then me as a receiver coach coming in, right, and working with Brent, if Brent's super demanding and correcting them in a certain way, sometimes it's my role to pull guys apart and say, okay, now did you hear what he's saying? Here's how we have to do that, right? It's almost good cop, bad cop. And I think he appreciated that about me, right? Because regardless whether it's the demanding style or talking to somebody, right, eventually it's what can they learn and how can you get them to produce the best way. And so different types of there's different types of managing people. And if I wasn't in this profession, right, like, because ultimately this is a people profession. It's a profession where you're dealing with kids, where you're dealing with alumni, boosters, fans, right? Like, I've always said this about people in this profession, because I've experienced it a little bit, that if you're a coach and you don't like people and you don't like players, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Some people might say, oh, like, at some places, right, it's for the money or the prestige or this or that. But ultimately, once again, it comes down to people and getting them to do what's beneficial for them, what's beneficial for the team, what's beneficial for the university, right? Like all those things. So, management style, it's kind of an interesting term, right? Because, like I said earlier, there's different ways you have to manage each kid individually, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not a square peg through a round hole. And so I would think I tend to be more patient with guys, although I think maybe some people would say differently, like on the field. I think, there are times that I get kind of riled up and I get loud, right? And I tell them, I say to them, sometimes you have to listen to what I'm saying, not how I'm saying it, right? Yeah. But also, like, you ultimately want to be supportive of guys, right? But there's a demand factor too, and so I'd say, like, one of my strengths, leadership, is how you manage people and how you get them to see your vision.
Mm-hmm. If it was just X's and O's, it'd be boring and not very interesting.
Yeah, the X's and O's, the X's and O's are really the easy part of it. And I say the easy part, but, like, for example, I always thought that I'd be better in this role than as offensive coordinator. Okay.
Okay.
And people have asked me, before, well, like, you've never been a coordinator, and most coordinators become head coaches, right? Well, I've always taken a different approach, where I've always thought that if your guys, right, if you get your guys to produce and they play well, opportunities are going to come, right? And so I've always taken great pride in kind of staying in my lane and trying to get my players to play at the highest level possible, okay? And then I thought, hey, if those other things come, they come. But it's so funny, like, I look at whether it be Greg Davis at the University of Texas or Marcus Tuiasosopo, who I was with at Rice, or Brent Pease, right? Like, Brent is constantly involved in looking at new schemes and really knowing the big picture, right, of everything, and implementing those things. And I think he enjoys the scripting and the drawing cards and, like, all those things. Well, there's things that I enjoy about that. Like, I really appreciated when he kind of turned third down over to me last year and said, okay, hey, I want you to game plan third down. And I enjoyed it. Eric Price and I worked together on that. And then I'd kind of go in and present to Brent, like, hey, here's what I'm thinking on third down. Okay, how can we keep it simple, but how can we add a few wrinkles,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we end up being really good on third down. And he'd sometimes come to me and say, "Hey, I like this idea, don't like this idea. What do you think about this?" And I think anytime you can work in collaboration, right, and that there's different ideas, boy, that's great. Okay, and that. But what I've also found, right, whether you're a coordinator or a position coach, you tend to do much better when people value your opinion. Doesn't mean they have to take your opinion all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you know they value your opinion, then once again, like that's how you grow as a coach. Now, like I said, I don't think I particularly, would enjoy all the things that he's doing. I think sometimes maybe he won't enjoy what I'm doing in my role right now, right? And so anytime you're trying to put together an organization, and you talk about leadership skills and things like that, right? It takes a team, right? And we're in what I think the greatest team sport there is, right? 11 guys in offense, 11 guys in defense, special teams, right? That, one guy screws up and the play can be a disaster, right? So how do you work together? Your leadership style, things like that. How can you make things work? I still remember, I go back to Mac Brown or Jim Caldwell, like David Shaw at Stanford was involved in every aspect of the pass game and run game and managing the offense. Wasn't as involved with the defense, right? But Dave had his expertise on offense, right? And I thought it was great. I learned a ton from Dave, but I also said when this role was going to happen sooner or later, it's happened later for me than sooner, that what I wanted to do is I wanted to hire really good people. I wanted to put them in place to give their opinions and have that collaboration, but also trust guys that, they've done this for a long time too. And if they're not good at what they're doing, then why'd you hire them? Right.
Yeah.
And now some people need to grow also, right? There's continual growth. I mentioned earlier about, gosh, I didn't think maybe I'd be as good at what Brent does as maybe what I'm doing now. But also too, what I found that it was when I was a young coach, a younger coach, I still think I'm pretty young. But I really enjoyed it. It goes back to the personal aspect of things. Like I liked the recruiting. Okay, I liked getting to know the parents. I liked, okay, how can I beat this other team for this kid, right? How do you sell yourself, sell the university, sell your program? Like what's going to make this guy tick, or jump, I should say, right? And developing those relationships and writing letters and I know I've gotten a lot of graphics, things like that. How do you get those people on the hook, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a very Montana term, right? Like I know there's a lot of great fishing in the state, right? So how do you get them on the hook and how do you snag them, right? Yeah. And once again, it's not necessarily through pressure. It's showing people that, once again, it's good for the university, but it's also going to be good for them and it's good for us, right, as a team.
Yeah. You've worked for some luminary head coaches. You've mentioned a couple of them in your 30-plus year coaching career. I'll name a couple of them, and if you would just kind of tell me what you took away from that person with regard to their leadership.
Absolutely.
So you were a graduate assistant at Penn State for Joe Paterno.
Yeah. So the thing that always really impressed me, and I told this story, I was on ESPN earlier today, that always really impressed me about Joe is, first of all, he really valued his assistants. If you look at the guys that were on the Penn State staff, he trusted them. They were there for a long time. They could have gone and gotten other jobs and things like that. But he made it an environment where it was enjoyable to come to work, that it was demanding, okay? It was on the highest level possible, right? But people liked coming to work there. And I still remember the day my parents were visiting, and I was walking around the football office at Penn State, and Joe heard me out in the lobby, and I had told him that my parents were going to be in town. Well, he walks out, right? He walks out, and he's like, "Bobby, is this your Are these your parents? I'm like, yes. And we called him Joe. Okay. It wasn't Coach Paterno.
Yeah.
Like everybody at Penn State, he was always first name basis. I said, yeah, Joe, this is my dad, Mannert, and my mom, Grace. He was like, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy, so good to have you here. And, the Joe Paterno distinct voice. And he took them in his office and talked with them for over an hour. Okay. And I'm sitting here thinking, wow, Joe Paterno, right? Like he's got all these other things going on, but he's gonna take his time, an hour out of his day, right? And he's getting pulled in all different directions and spend time with my parents. Okay, that showed me that he really cared about the people that worked for him. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'll tell you this too. My dad was a university professor, and I can say esteemed. He was my dad.
Yeah.
Okay. But that had a huge lasting impact on his life, and it meant the world to him. And so leadership style, Joe was very demanding, right? Joe was on the football field. I mean, I think he was in his probably late 60s when I was there. But man, you want to talk about energy and running around and being involved. And there was no doubt at Penn State who was driving the ship. And so what I would say is his compassion towards people and his caring about people, but also his demanding nature. Because football was obviously, I mean, you won't be the all-time winningest coach in college football, right? If you didn't have that competitive flair and aspect. But I just remember him as being a great person.
Yeah.
And caring for his kids, but also like pushing him in the right direction.
How about Rick Neuheisel at Washington?
Yeah, so Rick was another guy, like if you think about Rick, great quarterback at UCLA, right? Rose Bowl winning quarterback. And then, was an assistant coach there. Really got the head coaching job at the University of Colorado. Kind of got thrust upon him very rapidly also when Bill McCartney retired. Okay. And Rick was a guy that had a lasting impact on my career and life because when you talk about football, right? Everybody, we all talk about the X's and O's and this guy's a genius and that guy's a genius. If you look at football for the most part, right, we're a copycat.
If it works for somebody else,
if it works for somebody else, we're going to put them in, and you steal a lot from other programs, and that's being a good coach too, mm-hmm. right? Look at this great play design. Rick had such a personality that I don't care if you were a player or a coach. Okay, and I've only been around really two other people like this. Okay, one was President Obama, and then the other was Mac Brown at Texas. That when he walked in a room, whether it be with players, coaches, or recruits, he made you feel like you were the only person sitting there. Okay, and the importance of recruiting. Rick was a meticulous and obsessive note writer, and like, okay, what can we do to get this guy to have real interest when we were at Washington, the University of Washington, right? Like what's the hook? What's going to make this guy think that this is the place for him? And so I just remember his tenaciousness in terms of recruiting and also was caring. Like he was invested. He spent more time on the phone with kids, right, than any other head coach that I'd been around. And great football coach in his own mind, or not own mind, in his own right, excuse me.
Yeah.
He's probably a great football coach in his own mind also. But here's a guy that, like I said, right, played quarterback, coached receivers, coached quarterbacks, had been a coordinator at different places. But then also, like, this guy loves football, right? He loves being on the field, loves being around the players. Like, he's got a great job at CBS, right? Mm-hmm. Doing the pregame stuff at CBS. Well, what's he doing right now? he's coaching in the UFL, right? Because he likes football and he likes being around. He likes being around players, and so he's had a phenomenal impact on me just in terms of like recruiting and how do you get, is it letters, is it phone calls, like just taking the time to do it? Because some people say, and I disagree with this, right? Some people say that you got to hire a bunch of young guys because they're going to be more passionate on the road and they're going to be able to connect with the kids, and things like that. And there are, when I was a young guy, yeah, right, like I added great value, like in recruiting, but also I think that experience in terms of doing it a long time, creating those relationships, I think you'd be a great recruiter as an older coach. You look at Rob Fennessy on our staff, right? Like he is invested in the state, right? He's invested in Montana, but it takes all different kinds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's got to be a good balance, young guys, old guys, things like that. But Rick was a guy that he was just tenacious when it came to recruiting.
And then how about Mac Brown? You've mentioned his name from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, so Mac Brown was a guy that, and really I'm kind of modeling my tenure right off him. And some people have said that maybe I've got to slow down because I want to be involved in everything. I want to be involved in recruiting. I want to be involved in the junior day planning. I want to be involved in, the practice and the schedule and fundraising, right, and all these things. And but when you watched Mac, like he had an organization at the University of Texas where it was not only the assistant coaches and the coordinators, it was the academic coordinator, it was the weight room coach, okay, the strength coach, Jeff Madden, it was the equipment people, okay. Like he had his hand in everything and he touched everything and wanted to know everything that was going on. And like, sometimes sometimes you don't realize, and we talked about this earlier, like you get pulled in a bunch of different directions. And there'd be times that, walk by the office and, Mac's not in his office. So where is he? Or he's gone for this day or gone for that day. And he was down doing something with the boosters or doing something with the alumni association. But once again, right, because he wanted to sell his vision, right, and then implement his vision through all those different people. He wanted his hands with the academic coordinator. And, hey, what's this guy doing in school, right? How can we help him? How can we make him better in the equipment? What's the best equipment that we can get, right, for our players? And so you look at him from some people called him the CEO, okay, head coach, but really good football mind also, okay? But once again, he managed people. And he did it from above, but he had his hand in everything.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've tried to model my tenure thus far after what he was. And the other thing that I always remember about him was it was really interesting. As when you're recruiting high school seniors, a lot of times you go in December and January and you go in on home visits. And with Mac, we didn't do a lot of home visits. And I was like, wow, that's kind of, everywhere else with Rick and Joe Tiller and this and that, like that was a staple part of the recruiting. What was cool about Coach Brown was that he wanted to make it an event. And he wanted to show up like at the school. He wanted the kid to take him around, meet the kid's favorite teachers and the principal. And then when Mac was at the school, it was like there was this buzz. People came out in the hallway and, he was signing autographs. He was doing all these things. So it was almost better than a home visit because the parents would end up showing up anyway,
yeah.
right? Because they knew that was their chance to be around Coach Brown. But it really turned into an event for the kids and also for the school, right? If you're the head football coach at the University of Texas, much like the University of Montana, right? Like, when the head coach shows up, it's a really cool thing. And so I really, I love that about him. And I love that, it was very easy for him to fly private a lot of times, right? Head coach at the University of Texas.
Boosters.
He liked he liked going through the Dallas airport. Okay, he liked going through LAX, right? Because once again, he was being in touch with people that maybe sometimes he wouldn't, like random Texas fans that he wouldn't have a chance to be around. Okay, and he would take time for those people all the time. And I mean, I don't care who it was, but you know, you only get one chance to make a first impression, right?
Correct.
And I never saw him, right, like make a bad impression. And so that was really I want to say groundbreaking for me, because just watching a real pro do it, that's had a lasting impact on me.
Yeah, and then a 2005 national championship.
Yeah, and it was such a great experience. Because not many people know this. I had a chance. It was funny when I was leaving the University of Washington. I wasn't planning on leaving the University of Washington. I loved it there, but USC was on a really good run, and it was first Norm Chow called me up, and then Pete Carroll, and they wanted me to come to USC to coach the running backs, and I had to interview. So I went down. I interviewed at SC, and it was really. I was going to coach running backs. I'd been coaching wide receivers, and to tell you the truth, right? Like you talk about a growing moment in football. You realize how much football you don't know when you're around guys like that, around Pete Carroll. And there were some things that I knocked it out of the park, you know, on the interview. And then there were some things that I was like, oh, protections and like different things. And so, you know, it was a great moment to be like, okay, hey, you know, I do need to keep growing, right? So I have the interview. I fly back to Seattle that night. My wife's in North Carolina seeing her family, and I'm sitting around, and the phone rings, and it was Mac Brown on the other end of the line, and he goes, you know, Bobby, Cleve told me, Cleve Bryan, a guy that I worked for as a graduate assistant in Illinois, and he was like a second father to me. You know, Bobby, we followed you over the years, and you know, I think you're ready now. You're ready to come to a place like the University of Texas. And Cleve said great things. He goes, I'm going to offer you the receiver job at Texas. And I'm like, wow. So I was just at SC today. Mac Brown offers me the job at Texas that night. I'm flying down to Austin in the morning. I had to meet the staff and things like that. And you know, it's really easy sometimes in this business or in a profession when it's public to maybe get a little full of yourself, right? And I was on cloud nine. I'm like, gosh, SC, Texas, boy, I got the world by you know what,
Yeah.
Okay. And so I get off the phone with Mac, and my wife calls. She's in North Carolina, and I said to her, hey, I just got a job offer at the University of Texas, and you know, I interviewed today at SC. I'm like, what do you want to do? Because I've always wanted my wife involved in
partnership.
In the process. Excuse me. And so she goes, well, you know, you've recruited LA, and right, you have a base there, but we know people at Texas, and we're not going to be able to afford to live in LA. You're going to have to drive, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes to get to work, this and that. She goes, we know people in Texas, and it's a great place. Like, let's do Texas. So I go down there the next day and tell Mac I'm taking the job. Met with Greg Davis, the coordinator at that time, and also too, you know, I think it's really important, much like I did with Brent Pease here, when Bobby called me and told me, hey, I want you to come, and I said, well, the first thing I want to do is I want to talk to Brent, okay?
Yeah.
And I'd met Brent over the years, but I also told him, you know, when we got on the phone, I said, hey, I want you to know this. Yeah, I've done this a long time. I said, but I'm coming in to learn your offense. Run it the way that you want to run it. And I told Greg Davis the same thing. Like, I want to learn from you. You know, even right now, you know, at my age, like I always tell players, right? You're either green and growing or ripe and rotting, right? And so I think number one, that lets guys know that, okay, like, he's not coming in to think he's running the show, number one.
Yeah.
But also, right, there's nothing wrong with being a team player, right? Just like we preach to our players, right? And then also putting other people at ease, right? And so I go down to Texas, take the job, And first year we go 12-1, right? We lose. We go to our first BCS game, okay, the Rose Bowl against Michigan, and we kick a field goal in the final seconds to win. Okay, the one game we lost that year was to OU. Okay, and just like a very big game here, right? That's the game people remember. They were happy about the Rose Bowl, but they would have rather beat OU.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and man, that off season, like you want to talk about studying OU and what they do and how to attack them better, and you know what we had to improve on. And so the next year, right? We go 12-0. We beat OU. Okay, it was kind of the emergence of Vince Young was when kind of that Rose Bowl game. Like he was a really good player before that, but that kind of set him up for the next step.
Yeah.
And then Vince had a great year. We had a great defense, but really good players on offense. But winning the national championship, beating Southern Cal, okay, USC, the team that I chose not to go to,
Mm-hmm.
it was really satisfying and really, you know, I won't say the pinnacle of my career, even though it was great to win the national championship, because there's so many highlights and experiences that I've had from my career, but that was a special moment.
Yeah. And you had mentioned on the Grizz Fan pod that you have over the years kept a little notebook.
Yeah.
Like with the idea that this time was going to come for you. I got the impression from listening to that you knew that at some point you might get this head coach opportunity, and getting some things written down in this notebook would be helpful.
Yeah.
Accurate?
Yeah, it really is. Because I think you can, you talk about, Rick Neuheisel and Joe Paterno, John Makovic, the guy I started with at the University of Illinois, who was head coach at Kansas City, then the University of Illinois, University of Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something good that you can take away from all those guys. Joe Tiller, Jim Caldwell, Mike Bloomgren at Rice, okay, who was our coordinator at Stanford, but then he got the head coaching job at Rice. Kirk Ferentz, right? Like he's done it for forever, right? And what I've done is I've kept a notebook of a number of things that I've really liked, okay? And then some things that I was like, well, maybe I would have do this different, right? Because you got to be you, right?
Authentic.
Yeah, got to be authentic.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I refer to that notebook all the time, I told you I like to tell stories. I'll tell a great story about Mike Shanahan, okay? I did a minority internship with the 49ers in 1994, and Mike had been the head coach at the Raiders, but then he came back to coach, be the offensive coordinator at the San Francisco 49ers under George Seifert. And this was really the inspiration for that notebook that I keep, okay? He told me, he came to me one day, I mean, I was a peon, right? Like I was an intern coach, for training camp. And he came to me one day and he goes, hey, I want you to do me a favor. I said, what's that, Coach Shanahan? And he said, I want you to take notes every time George Seifert speaks to the team, okay? So after practice, in team meetings, I want you to take notes about what he said, okay? And I was like, okay. So, I'd be there. Coach Seifert would call everybody up after practice. And, man, I was there. I was there with my pen and pad, right? And everything he said I wrote down. And then I'd go back to the dorm room, right? And then I'd rewrite those notes. And then I'd give them to Coach Shanahan, okay?
Okay. He wanted a deliverable from you then to
exactly.
Yeah.
And so and I got to tell you, there might have been 40 pages, right, of notes. I mean, it was very detailed.
Yeah.
Okay. And the funny thing I heard later on, after I went back to Wyoming and I was coaching the receivers and had a chance, one of the big mistakes in my career, right, was when Coach Shanahan offered me the offensive quality control job for the Broncos. Okay, and I was coaching at Wake Forest at the time, and I turned him down because Jim Caldwell, who was another one of my great mentors, was like, "What? You want to go do what? You draw up plays and do playbooks and stuff like that? You're coaching. You have your own room and you're making an impact. You're going out on the recruiting trail. Like you're getting valuable experience. As a young guy." And I kind of I'm gonna stay here, right? So it was funny. A few years later, Gary Kubiak, who I've known over the years, played for Coach Greg Davis at Texas A&M, and we played golf a number of times together. He goes, because he was the quarterback coach at the 49ers when Coach Shanahan was the coordinator. And he goes, "Hey, those notes that you wrote for Mike Shanahan?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "He uses those to this day." So long story short, right, going back to this journal that I've kept,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of got that from Mike Shanahan, right? Because when Mac Brown or when Kirk Ferentz or Rick Neuheisel or Jim Caldwell or Joe Tiller, right, when they'd speak to the team, when they different things in staff meetings, stuff like that, I wrote it down and I refer back to those things because here's some of the greats in the game, right? And if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Right? And stuff's really good.
Dropping free knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, Marcus Aurelius, right? Meditations, that's one of the most famous books ever. And that's all it is he just would write down other things that people would tell him that he thought had merit and value.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I tell the players all the time, just like I told you, are you ripe and rotting or green and growing, right? And that was from John Malkovich, right? When I remember him saying that at the University of Illinois all the time. And it's like we all can learn, right? Like I can learn every day in this role, right? Like there's some things that I'm going to do really well. There's going to be sometimes I fall short, right? So how do you learn from those things and make it better to make sure they don't happen again, right? The shortcomings. And so yeah, I've learned from some really good people. I've been around great assistants, been around really good players that have taught me a lot.
Yeah.
So it's a continual process.
Yeah. And then last question, because other coaches have talked about this, the transition from the assistant ranks to the head position then, and that was a transition for all of them because it was different, moving from whatever they did as a subordinate coach into the head role. Anything stand out for you early now in that transition for you?
Yeah, just not forgetting, right, that you can always take advice from other people. Like, I told you about Rob Fennessy or Brent Myers or, Eric Sanders has been around some great guys in the NFL. And, right, you can always, Jimmy Morimoto, our director of football operations, general manager, like never being afraid to take advice and listen to maybe something they see, right? Where I think sometimes as the head coach, people think it's all about your vision, right? And like I've said earlier, right, I believe when it's a collaborative effort, right, like things tend to run more smoothly. And, listening to guys that like, Rob Fennessy, he's been the head coach at Idaho State. Brent Myers has been a coordinator, but is also, an interim head coach, at different places. And just being able to listen. But then in the final conclusion of things, right, you have to make your decision, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people think that, that, hey, it's my way or the highway. But, like, getting good advice is never bad, right? But then making the decision, and then whatever decision that is, you go with it and you move forward, right? Because you can learn from mistakes, but if you keep looking in the past, right, then you'll stay in the past, right? And so I always say to our team, right, and to our coaches, because I've got immense respect for Bobby Houck, right? Bobby and Stacy are dear friends. And you look at what he did here at the University of Montana, like tremendous run, right? I don't know if it will ever be equaled.
Yeah,
Okay?
a conference leader in wins.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it ever will be. But what I'm trying to do, right, is take what Don Reed, Joe Glenn, and the different guys that have come before me, and how can I build on that, right? How can I build on Bobby Houck's success? And, I talk about pushing it forward with our players all the time. And so yeah, being the head coach, it's like I said, you get pulled in a lot of different directions. But on the other hand too, that's what you sign up for. And like I said, I'm enjoying every second of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to push it forward.
Good. People can't see this with the camera, but your phone has lit up 25 times over the course of this interview, which means there's one more person looking for a piece of your time.
Well, so what's funny is I found a great way to manage time. Okay, and since I've been in this role, there are nights I sleep really well, and there are other nights that like I wake up and then your mind starts racing, right? And I might get 25, 30, 40 texts a day. Okay, and I like communicating through text messages, but also on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Not, as you know, and I apologize to you, right? Not as big of an email person, okay? But because, your phone's always handy, right?
Yeah, it's with you.
Yeah, it's with you. And it's so funny. The other night I woke up, and it was about 2 o'clock, and I started thinking about some things, and I was like, okay. Then you grab your phone, right? And I was like, gosh, I had all these text messages that I hadn't returned yet. And what I found is text messaging somebody at 2:30, 3 o'clock is a great deal because a lot of times they can't respond back, and you don't get in this constant text battle.
Mm-hmm.
But you've also answered them, right?
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how my sleep schedule has changed a little bit because I'm always finding ways to catch up with some of the things that maybe I didn't get done that day. So that's one of the things.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our coach interviews. We've now had the chance to talk leadership with all of our head coaches here at U of M. Coach, best of luck for the rest of spring ball and into the season next fall.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep pushing it forward.
Awesome. Next up then is the Director of Athletics, Kent Haslam, and that should be dropping here pretty soon because we actually have that one recorded already. So until then, thanks for checking us out, and we will catch you next time on the Montana Grizzly Leadership Project.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Appreciate.
Thanks for all you do at the University of Montana and being the faculty athletic rep and also being a positive influence on kids. Thank you.
Thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.